And we say the word responsibility so fast, but if we dissect what it really means, is exactly everything you just said. It's the ability to respond. That's how we got the word responsibility. It's
Right. Right.
have ability to
Right.
respond. And so when you're mature and you can change the energy, then you are you have the ability to respond to those situations and to make a positive change in someone's life, to make a deposit in someone's life. Because I think, don't quote me on the year-ish, but I think it was around the 80s, early 80s, maybe 70s. I can't remember. The marshmallow experiment with the kids.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's prime example right there. It's just a
Yeah.
matter of trying to create character in these kids by saying, if you hold off from eating this one marshmallow, when I come back, I'll give you two. And the number of kids, it was about 50-50. You know, the ones that were like, you know, because the person walked out of the room and they'd wait, and boy, they'd sit. The video is hilarious, man. Them kids would be like, and they get to the point to where I gotta have it. And unfortunately, women, you guys really need to find that on YouTube somewhere and watch that, because just like Brian had said, exactly like Brian said, man, tell a guy no. And watch how, and you saw, and what's sad, now here's what's sad about that experiment. Everybody needs to watch that, because I had to do it just for me to grow up to see how I really was behaving, man. That was an eye-opener for me. But they have proven scientifically on numbers, the kids, they followed that group of kids for 20 years, man.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that waited were more successful than the ones that didn't. And so if we just digress from even talking about women and relationships and go back into the men, masculinity, and male, that's what has wounded my life so bad in the decisions that I have made, is based on the guy that wouldn't wait for wait for them to come back. I just went ahead, and when nobody was in the room, I took that marshmallow.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'd watch somebody else who waited and going, how you stupid, I had my marshmallow, da-da-da-da-da-da. And then all of a sudden they're eating too. And now you mad. So you get upset because other people are prospering because they actually got some character and they can be trusted. I couldn't be trusted. And that's sad, man. I lived a life of lies and deceit. And so it's really sad when that becomes a part of your life, because, oh man, I want to speak to everybody. I really want women to hear us, but man, I beg you, man, stop lying. Just the fruit of lying and what that does to you is more devastating. You already know. If you are anything like me, and what I'm saying is resonating with you, you already know how damaged you are, because you know you're a liar, but you don't want to admit it. And physically, it begins to tear you down. Physically, it has been proven, I'm telling you, over and over again, of what it does to your organs. Because you create, and I'm going to run off a little bit here, but in the aspect of becoming more mature and accepting responsibility and ownership for what you do, the stuff that you neglect and the lies that you keep telling, it actually begins to take a toll on your organs, because you create cortisol levels. Fellas, listen, man. You think you're getting away with something. You really do. I did. I got a chick over here and I got a chick over there, and I'm doing this at night, but I'm doing this during the day, and I can talk to the one on the phone, and I'll be in that conversation, and then I can talk to another female and be on that conversation. The stress level I believe was directly responsible for my heart attack, because you can't live in fight or flight. You can't allow cortisol levels to stay here all the time, because your body cannot physically handle it, and we begin to break down. Men, even for get out of relationships, even if you're experiencing that on your job, if you go in every day and you hit fight or flight at 8 a.m. and you stay there till 5, no wonder they invented happy hour. That was invented for a reason, because you go to the bar and get your happy hour on because it was so bad at work and you're under such stress levels, your boss sucks, or things are coming down on you, or you're not growing as an employee or as a business owner, you're not learning better skills. We have a tendency to want to go run and drown that in something else, which is via sex, drinking, drugs, and all we're doing is adding more damage to our body. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I think, when you talk about addictions and sex is an addiction, drugs is addiction,
Yes.
all of those things, eating can be an addiction,
Mhm.
right? And so all those things are our attempts to quiet that voice on the inside, whether it's the voice that's crying out because it wants something that
Yep.
we're not getting. I'm talking about on a deeper spiritual level, or whether it's the voice of shame, right, for what we're doing. That stuff, that's real. That's where all addiction comes from,
Yes.
and so you can fight the addiction, you can try to defeat it with willpower, but there will be a point at which you are weak. And so you really got to get to the root, and that root is getting to the shame. It's getting to, what's at the bottom of this thing. um as you're talking, it pulled me back to that interview you made me watch, which was Joe Rogan and is it David
David
Goggin?
Goggins, yeah.
Yeah, Goggins.
That's my boy. Shout
Um,
out to David Goggins, man.
what's that?
Shout out to David Goggins, man.
Yeah. Well,
And
and but it's funny because when I was listening to it, and I know that you're a huge fan of him because you're kind of that crazy workout dude, and
yeah,
so
right.
I'm not, and so it doesn't hit me the same way. And so I'm watching it, man, and I'm listening to him about all the trauma he dealt with in the past, and I'm listening to him talking about how, it was all the fear that he had from all that trauma that pent up, and that he made a choice to fight it. I mean, just face every fear, and just and it was like he went from this side to this side, and did some
Right.
crazy stuff, right? But the thing that hit me the hardest as I'm listening to that is he talked about how all that trauma got stored in his body.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was interesting because he said for him, it was in his hip flexors, right? Where it was just pulling him in. And like even when he would run, his feet started, pointing in and tipping, and it was messing him up, and he was breaking his feet while he was running, and,
Yep.
all this different stuff. And then in my
He
own
actually
life,
developed a hole in his heart too.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
just all that stuff. But
crazy.
the thing that we don't realize is this body is a machine. And it's a machine that is meant to express what's going on the inside. One person said it this way, that the body is our hardware and our mind is our software. And the hardware can only work according to what the software is telling it to do. And in the same way, as we're doing things in our lives that we're not proud of, that we're ashamed of, that we know are wrong, those things are being somehow stored up inside of us. And I can
Toxic.
tell you, I mean, I remember my dad telling me about that, because my dad had some similar things that you've been talking about, Dave,
Yes.
which,
Yep.
as far as like, cheating on my mom and stuff, and that it's stored up in his body, and he ended up with a massive heart attack, even though he was in really good physical condition,
Yep.
and young. And I know me personally, going through stress of like a work environment, and dealing with going in and having to meet certain expectations, and people not being happy with you because you're making decisions that they don't like and stuff like that. That stuff ends up storing in your body too. The whole cortisol levels and stuff, all that stuff is real.
It's
But
real, man.
but at the same time, I remember, because I have I have a inversion table that I use because
Yes.
I've had a lot of back and neck issues, which I'm sure is related to this. I didn't always know that, but I'm pretty sure that that's how that works now. But I can remember, there'll be times where I'm like feeling really out of whack and really tight, and I will get on that inversion table and go upside down.
Yes.
My head's down here somewhere,
Yep.
and uh, it begins to pull me and expand me. And I know that there are certain times where I will feel the tightness in my body, like in my hips or something, and then it'll release.
Peace. Yeah.
And not only will it release, but I will have like a rush of emotion
Yep.
that will come from that. And I'll sit there and I'll find myself like crying, like all of a sudden I got super emotional. And I don't know why. I'm just sitting there on this
Right. With no
table, man.
thoughts of making you sad, right?
No,
Right.
I'm not doing anything. I'm just sitting there. I'm like, man, oh, I'm tight. And then it's like, oh, wow. And then all of a sudden it's just like this rush. And you just go,
That sucks when tears go backwards, man, instead of down. That's confusing.
what's
You cry
that?
upside down. You cry upside down, man. That's all
Oh
pissed.
yeah, yeah, right. but I mean, to me, that's the same thing. It's you're storing up that emotional energy within your body, and it's tearing it up. It's tearing it up. I don't know how we got all the way into that, but I think
Well,
I
yeah,
think
but it's
that's
still
important.
it still is completely on subject to a man and a boy. Because
Oh,
how many I think where we're having a crisis, a big crisis with men is this unbelievable amount of silence that we carry. I, I in the book, the other book that I wrote, Shift Happens, I describe myself as standing in a room, standing in a crowded room. My mouth is wide open. I'm screaming, and nothing's coming out. And I'm hurting. I don't want to do the things I'm doing, and now I don't know how to turn it off.
mm.
I don't know how to stop doing this giant avalanche of moral problem, ethical problem. Just you could run it. I'm sure I could get a lot of letters of the people who I heard it, and they would grind me. They hate me. I understand that. I take responsibility for that. But it's like so many of us men don't, we are so afraid to go ask for help, man. Almost going to a psychologist is taboo. Going to psychiatrist is taboo. Actually talking about, man, maybe you need to get on medication, man, to kind of calm this anxiety down. And I'm not against that, because my thing is get the help you need, but please understand that medication is a band-aid. Medication is not the cure-all.
Right.
Medication is a band-aid. So when you come down, if you have to be medicated, it's better than drinking, where you become inebriated and you can't think, and or you're doing drugs and you're doing things illegally. That puts a whole nother pressure on the pressure you're trying to get rid of, and you're creating more pressure.
Oh yeah.
Driving drunk, get that ticket one time and see what happens. And so my whole thing is that when you have those moments of clarity, is, to me, it's still the power of a paradigm shift. And we all experience that in our lives. And you have those moments to where it's like you got this mature guy in you going, you know what, maybe you shouldn't watch this stuff anymore. Maybe you should stop listening to this music. Maybe you should start meditating. Maybe you should start praying. I had an experience one time of talking to this brother, man, that I really, really liked. And he was a Hebrew Nation guy. And so out of the blue, man, I hit him up one day, and I knew he was struggling with some stuff. And so I actually threw it back on him. I said, so aren't you guys supposed to pray like 2-3 times a day? I wasn't sure. And he said, yeah. And I said, well, I want to ask you, man, how's your prayer life? Dude, the conviction, he was just like, That's what I'm missing, man. I need to get back. I was such a better person when I put myself in a spiritual situation. And so we need to know how to do that in order to listen. We need to do that. As far as, it's like, what's amazing to me as a man, we still are having archaic demands or beliefs that this is what a man is. And I believe masculinity still needs to be defined better on what being a man is. And so that, to me, the responsibility comes on us and us alone as men. If we don't take the time to listen, just like you were saying, the one thing about like the inversion table, and I love an inversion table, man, it's done so much for me. But the thing about the inversion table is you've positioned yourself differently than any other time. We don't live upside down. And so a lot of things are going to happen because you're in a whole different environment at that very moment. Everything changes because you're upside down. And that in and of itself brings change to an individual, even if it's but for a moment. A paradigm shift happens. Tears come, different thoughts come. So it's the same thing with meditation. If you and I had this podcast and we both talked at the same time, nobody would listen. But that's how we do these voices on the inside of us. This is how I feel we treat God. This is my take. This is how I believe we do God. It's like we want to pray and ask God for this and pray. And my whole thing is like, somewhere you need to shut up and listen. Because we don't, our culture, man, is going like this. I mean, we're moving constantly, a mile a minute. We're not rest. And I'm coming full circle because I believe some of the expectations of what we think men are you never get tired. You can work. You can handle all kinds of problems. You can lift stuff. You can be strong. You can fix this. You can do that. And we get under this blanket, man, and it's just heavy. And so we never take the time to stop to listen. And that to me is the power of meditation. It's the power of quieting the inner voice to hear something greater than you speak to your spiritual man. It speaks to your character. God will talk to your spiritual man, but you have to be in tune. And the only way to be in tune is to be quiet. We ain't quiet enough. We want to do how many people out there? I know right now, how many people out there, your time with God would be, God, I thank you. I pray. I prayed for 10 minutes this morning, jumped in my car, left, went to work. I had to get coffee, donuts. I had to deal with this person and that person. Then I come home and I have to deal with this person and that person. And then you got to eat dinner. Then you want to watch a little TV and then you get in the bed. And you wonder why your life is hell bent. Because you take no time to stop and appreciate the beautiful things of our own lives, which is to get in touch with the masculine soul that we carry, that it came with our DNA. Because that whole confusion of gender, we're not real good on that subject here on our podcast. Because to me, if you look down and you got a penis, that kind of tells you who you are. You are a male. You can't get out of that. So if
oh man,
yeah, that's probably gonna bring up a little bit of juice, but I'm just trying to say, man, let's be for real. So you were born with a masculine heart. You got a masculine brain.
Well, when you talk about the difference between men and women, right? Here we go. You ready? The Bible's really clear. When you look at what Scripture says, the Scripture says that there is no male and female in the spirit. That male and female is only in our bodies.
Yep.
And so underneath on the inside in our software, there is no gender in our software. So there's no difference between us as men and women in our makeup and ability. It's only in our body.
Yep.
And it's for the purposes that are present in this realm that we are in right now. We're going to transcend this realm someday, but in this realm there's a purpose there. And the masculine and the feminine come from then, not from the spiritual side, they come from the fleshly side. And when you track down into things, that there are different hormones that flow through our bodies that actually cause us to operate differently. That testosterone has a certain way it forms. It hardens, it makes the body more dense.
Yep.
And it increases strength. I mean, you're able to build more mass because of testosterone. Whereas when you talk about dealing with why can't I think of the thank you, estrogen. When you're dealing with estrogen actually makes you more flexible. It makes you softer, and it also has something to do with emotions within us. That when you have a higher surge of estrogen in your body, you get more emotional. You get more in tune with your emotions and how they're expressed towards you. Even you become more sensitive. And so those things are what make up the difference between male and female, right? And so when we talk about what it means to be a man, we're talking about some of that. I mean, it really doesn't have anything to do with what's going on underneath this. What we're going to leave behind, is this body, and that there is no gender in the spirit.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, that's just the truth. And the
You
key
pulled
is
me way into that stuff. You pulled me way into that conversation. I was trying to walk around and sidestep that conversation. And
no, we got to deal with it, man. Because you still got to feed your spirit, man. That's what it's coming down to, or spirit woman, whatever you want to call it. Your spiritual being.
Right. Well, and part of what you were talking about, right? When you're talking about you get up in the morning and you go to prayer, right? And can you quiet yourself?
Yep.
That comes down to discipline.
Oh, don't get
And
me started.
discipline is a form of character. It has to do with being able to deny yourself, right? When you're disciplining yourself, you're denying what maybe you want to do. And so you talked about like going and picking up donuts. Being able to say no to some donuts is a form of character. It's disciplining. It's saying that's not good for me, so I'm going to choose something else, even though I really want it really badly, right? And so when we talk about the difference between men and boys in the development of character, it's also the ability to deny self. As a matter of fact, the number one thing that I put in the book about how do you tell the difference between men and boys is that boys are selfish. They're self-centered. Everything is about them. I mean, I remember playing in the neighborhood because the neighborhood that I grew up in had a lot of kids, right? I mean, my neighbors across the street, they had 14 kids in one house, right? And so, anytime we wanted to play football, we just went across the street and we're like, hey, we got a whole football team. But I always had people, and people would always come to my house to hang out because my dad made pretty good money, and so we had a lot of stuff, and so we'd sit down and we'd have like some cookies and milk, and you'd pour the milk. But as a boy, what would you do when you'd have two levels of milk and one would be a little bit lower than the other? Who got the lower level?
Right.
The other person did.
What
You're like, here you go, and I always got the one with the most milk because that's what boys do, right? Who got the bigger cookie?
Right.
When you were in charge of it, let's say, oh, there's only one cookie left, let's break it in half, and you found out, oh, it wasn't equal. You hurried up and played it off, and you handed the little one to your friend. Here you go, and then you took a bite really quick. Why? Because boys are selfish. When you are immature, you're self-centered, you're selfish. You can't deny yourself. And so you can't make those choices. And so if you're dealing with a boy, you're dealing with somebody who hasn't matured at all, then what you're dealing with is somebody who can't make decisions for you. They're going to make it for themselves.
And with that is where Children are selfish. That's
Right.
that's
Immaturity, right?
innate,
Yeah.
man. They're immature. They're children. Um, but how I title it is when you're older, your selfishness becomes toxic.
Oh, yeah.
And that's when problems start in your life, and you're trying to find ways to blame, and it is your own level of selfishness that gets you in these situations that you don't even want to be in, but you're in them because your selfishness is so toxic. It's almost like an addiction. And it's like you almost get off on maintaining this certain level of drama because it makes you feel complete.
Yeah.
It's also a distracting tool because you get so much drama going on. Because it's so funny. Like over the last 3 years, I have spent countless hours in meditation. It's changed my life. It has changed my life because I never took that time to stop and listen. First of all, I was so afraid to be quiet because I didn't want to hear the voices. I didn't want to hear, you're really doing wrong, man. You shouldn't be doing it, man. You should be home. You should be taking care of it. You should be da da da. I don't want to hear that. So you just keep things going. It's so easy to fall into another, I ain't gonna say fall. So easy to walk into another relationship because it just keeps the drama going. So you don't have to deal with that the level of selfishness, man, that has become toxic. And the thing about it is it bleeds into everything in your life. And that was the hard thing for me to accept finally was my level of selfishness. Trust me, guys, trust me. You can't contain it. And so it begins, it's like a spider web. It's like a cup that overflows. It spills over into your children. It spills over into your relationships. It spills over into your job, dealing with your relatives, your parents. You can't control it. And so it comes to a point to where it's almost like a deliverance from selfishness when you become to be selflessness. Is that the right word? Selflessness?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the denial of self. It's the denial of your desires. It's getting that stuff under control. And that's part of growing up, right? I mean, that's part of maturing. And that's kind of
Oh, yeah.
what we're talking about from the standpoint of, the difference between men and boys. When you're a boy, when you're immature, you got to have your way. You got to do what you want in every moment, and you got to take the easy road, right? I mean, somebody who's mature can take the hard road, but somebody who's immature takes the easy road every time. That's why, and I can tell you so many times, I mean, I've been married for 23 years, and there's been many times when it would have been easier to call it quits. At least it felt that way, when you're in it. I mean, I know that there's a lot more to it than that, but
Right.
it's like it is hard to dig in there and get through on the other side of whatever drama you're going through, especially when you've made bad decisions, like you've done dumb things, and sometimes it's like, well, it'd be easier for me to just start over with somebody who don't know about the dumb things that I did,
Yep.
and just go there. But maturity is the ability to take that hard road. But that's where the longevity of success comes from is once you've made those hard decisions and
Yep.
you've pushed through is when you get to the big payoffs, right? And so um you know the fact that the number one thing is boys are selfish. They're selfish, whereas men have the ability to deny themselves. They have the ability to put someone else first as opposed to themselves. And I think, ladies, if I can say this to you, the way you see that first and foremost is, are they living only for themselves, or have they yielded to someone else, right? And I think it starts with, have they first of all yielded to God? I mean, is the man that you're looking at, or that your son or daughter, I mean, that your daughter's looking at, is he yielded to something bigger than himself, or is he just living for himself?